Hi, it's Christy from Joy Fiber Art. I thought I would do a couple videos on different ways that you can set up the warp on your loom for all you new weavers. I'm using a SAORI WX60 loom, but you can adapt this to any type of loom. Most importantly, everyone is going to have a different way that works for them, so I know when I first got started, it was really helpful to watch what other people did. This is just how I have adapted a few different styles so it works for me. To get started, I wound my warp using my DIY warping board that I made out of PVC pipe. This is super easy to make and way cheaper than buying one if you want to make your own. I'm using a couple different yarns for my warp that are bamboo or tencel, and you'll see later why I really regretted this. I've adapted a front to back warping to be a little more back friendly, so I'm starting by attaching sticks for my cross. I also DIY'd these as my loom didn't come with any extra sticks, and so I cut some dowels and drilled holes in the end so I could use those metal binder rings to attach them. This cross is really important because it keeps your warp threads in order, so I'm sliding each section in order onto the sticks and then attaching the ring at the end to make sure they don't fall off. Once my cross sticks are set up, I'm removing my ties at the cross and spreading out the warp threads so I can start to feed them into the reed. So to have proper and consistent tension on your warp, you roughly want to wind your warp on in the same width as your project will be at the end. So by using the reed when you're winding on your warp onto the back beam, it helps to also make sure that everything stays in order and it's the same width. The process here is really simple. You just have to grab the next cross, which will have 2 threads attached, and pull the loop through the reed. I'm alternating, leaving a space in between each loop on the reed because ultimately I'm going to have 1 strand per slot in my reed and I want it to be even. So after I pull a few strands through, I tend to do a slip knot on the back side just to make sure that they don't slide back if I move the reed or anything happens. This process is actually quite quick because your threads are already in order and you just use the cross sticks to guide you. As I mentioned earlier, I did regret using bamboo and tencel for my warp. This is not the first time I've learned this lesson, unfortunately. They just look so pretty and the end product is so soft and luxurious. But these fibers have an almost sticky texture to them, and when you work with them as a warp, they can also be very full of static. They're constantly connecting with each other and tangling, and it just makes longer warps really problematic. You'll see by the end that I did give up on the tangles at the end and just cut them off. Once the threads are all in the reed, I used an extra stick at the back to secure the ends. So I started trying to run it through each of the loops at the end, but I just got annoyed. It was taking too long, and so I ended up just tying knots and then sliding the stick through between the knots, and that way it was able to secure it at the end. I then tied the stick to the apron bar, and so it was nice and secure at the back. Then begins the process of winding on the warp. I should add that I'm using 300 strands in my warp, which is much wider than what I've used in the past. The pre-wound SAORI warp has 200 strands, and that's kind of what I've been using as my guidepost, but I wanted to try something a little bit wider. So I'm using pieces of cardboard as spacers in my warp, so every couple rotations of the beam at the back, I'm adding another piece in order to keep the tension kind of consistent. This is where the tangles really start to become evident, so I had removed the crossbars before winding on the warp because it was slowing me down so much. It kept kind of attaching to the wood. It was very annoying, and it was much easier to take it out than to try to keep adjusting all the little tangles. So this worked quite well at the beginning, but by the end of the warp, it was taking longer and longer to straighten all of the tangles out before the reed, and so I did eventually kind of give up and cut off the worst of it at the end. I find that this part is the part I always get the most frustrated with, and it's one of the reasons why I had moved to a sectional warp on my other loom, so I just don't have to do this part. Anyway, I eventually got it all wound on the back beam, and it was time to set up the heddles. I decided to tape the threads lightly at the top of my loom to help me keep them in order, and then I pulled them out of the reed and started pulling 2 at a time off the top to feed into the heddles. This did not take very long and everything stayed in order. It was very smooth. I always do a slip knot after 10 or so heddles are set up, and that way it just helps to ensure that they won't get pulled out accidentally. So once this is done, I go back and add each thread into the reed, making sure to keep them all in order. As a new weaver, this might be one of the most frustrating parts because it's really easy to accidentally twist them coming from the heddles onto the reed. You likely are not going to figure this out until you've woven a couple rows, so just keep an eye out for twists. Once I was done slaying the reed, I used the special weaver's knot. I can never remember what it's called, but I tied the ends onto the front bar and then adjusted the tension as needed to make sure it was even. I always use a thicker yarn to weave a first few rows at the beginning of every project, and that helps me to even everything out and see if there's any issues. If you do notice some crossed threads in your reed, you can simply undo the knot, pull them out, switch them in the reed, and tie it back on again at the front, and then just weave a couple rows and everything evens out. And voila, ready to get started on the project using this front to back warping technique, and it didn't hurt my back.